I moved to the small town a few days ago. I'm 32 and looking for some peace after chaotic city life. The town was picturesque, with charming, weather-beaten houses and quiet streets. I thought it would be the perfect spot to find inspiration for my writing. I still think about how wrong I was. One night, as I settled into my cabin by the shore, I heard a tapping sound coming from the walls. I figured it was just the old wood, expanding with the humidity. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't stop. I felt restless and uneasy, almost like something was watching me. As the days passed, the tapping turned into a pattern, rhythmic and deliberate. It felt like it was trying to communicate. I started noticing shadowy figures in the fog, lurking near my cabin. My heart raced each time, yet I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the stress of being in a new place was getting to me. I chatted with locals at the cafe, hoping to get a sense of the town. They shared odd stories about missing pets and strange happenings. Their faces were serious, though, and they looked uneasy talking about it. I thought they were either playing tricks or hiding something. I felt drawn to the town's history, like it was pulling me deeper into its secrets. Then one morning I found scratches on the cabin door. My heart sank as I traced the marks with my fingers. They looked fresh, but I couldn't remember anything scratching against the door. Sometimes I woke up feeling cold, even when the heater was on. The tapping had become more intense and the uneasy feeling grew heavier. I tried to rationalize it all, thinking I was just tired or overwhelmed. But I felt the tension building. I began to dig into the town's history, crossing a line with my curiosity. The more questions I asked, the more the locals retreated. It was like they were hiding something I was not meant to find. One night the tapping echoed differently. The air thickened around me, heavy and charged. I saw a shadow moving outside my cabin. It stood still, silent. My instincts kicked in, and I pulled back the curtain to look outside. There it was, a figure, just standing there staring back at me. I asked, "Are you okay?" But it didn't answer. My heart pounded in my chest. I backed away slowly, not wanting to turn my back on it. Then the tapping suddenly stopped. An eerie silence settled in. I felt a weight in my stomach, a creeping dread. Something told me I was too far gone. Maybe this wasn't just folklore. Maybe I was waking something that should have remained buried. The next day I went back to the cafe. I wanted answers. I asked about the figures in the fog. The locals exchanged nervous glances. One old man finally said, "Some things are better left alone." I felt a chill creep down my spine. What did he know? I had to find out. I couldn't shake the thought that whatever was haunting my cabin was deeply tied to the town. I was determined to discover the truth, even if it meant awakening something that had slept for far too long. I couldn't let it go. Something was off, and my curiosity outweighed my fear. I spent the next morning in the cafe, flipping through old newspaper clippings piled in a dusty corner. I looked for anything that might give me a clue about the town's dark side. One article caught my eye. Mysterious disappearances in Morro Bay. It detailed several residents who had vanished without a trace, their names crossed out with red ink. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read through it. The last disappearance was dated nearly 30 years ago, and the article ended abruptly, hinting at a cover-up. I wanted to ask the barista more but hesitated. Her eyes darted away from me as I approached the counter, a clear sign she didn't want to engage. I fumbled with my words, trying to sound casual. "What can you tell me about these disappearances?" Her face paled, and she whispered, "It's not a topic folks here discuss lightly." She wouldn't meet my gaze. The barista looked around as if afraid someone might overhear. "Just be careful," I nodded, the anxiety coiling tighter in my chest. I took my coffee and moved to a quiet corner. My mind raced. What had happened to those people? Were they connected to the tapping, the figures? I felt I was digging into something too deep. Later, I decided to explore the old lighthouse a short distance from my cabin. The locals had mentioned it in passing, exchanging glances as if it was cursed. I needed to see it for myself. Maybe the answers were waiting for me. The path to the lighthouse was overgrown. the air thick with the scent of salty sea. As I neared the structure, I noticed a shattered window, shards glittering in the weak sunlight. I stepped inside, heart pounding. It was dark and musty, a heavy silence hanging in the air. I wandered through the narrow halls littered with forgotten relics of its past. Old photographs lined the walls, images of smiling families and sailors forgotten by time. Then something caught my eye. A journal resting on a table, its pages yellowed and crumbling. I flipped it open, reading the frantic handwriting. It spoke of strange noises, shadows that moved on their own, and an obsession with uncovering a hidden truth. The last entry made my blood run cold. It warned of blurring realities and how the lost would come for those who sought the truth. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from behind me. I jumped, slamming the journal shut. My instincts screamed to run, but I was paralyzed. The shadows around me thickened, and I felt a presence just beyond my sight. That's when I saw it, a figure lurking in the doorway, blocking my escape. My breath caught in my throat. It looked similar to the one I'd seen before, its face obscured. All of my instincts told me to flee, but I was trapped, heart racing, caught between curiosity and terror. Then the figure stepped closer and everything went dark. I blinked in the darkness, disoriented. Was I dreaming? Slowly, I regained my senses. I could feel the cold, damp floor beneath me, and the smell of mold and salt mixed in the air. But where was the figure? Had it vanished? Tentative, I pushed myself off the ground, my heart still pounding. The darkness pressed in around me, almost suffocating, so I fumbled for my phone. The screen illuminated the room, casting a faint glow over the crumbling lighthouse interior. Shadows danced as I moved, but no one was there. My pulse quickened. The journal's warnings echoed in my mind. I needed to get out. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the doorway, I heard whispering, soft yet menacing. It seemed to come from the walls. "Find us," the voices urged. "You can't escape." I froze. Panic threatened to swallow me. I couldn't tell if it was real or a trick of my mind. The whispers continued, drawing me back into the darkness of the lighthouse, but I forced my feet to move. I had to leave. I stepped outside, gasping for fresh air, but the world felt different. The coastal winds that once felt so inviting were now ominous, carrying a heavy weight. I stumbled down the path, the lighthouse towering behind me like a guardian of secrets. As I reached the edge of the tree line, I spotted a figure standing near my cabin. My heart raced again, imagining it was the figure from inside. But as I got closer, it became clear that it was a woman. She looked familiar, the barista from the cafe. "What are you doing here?" I asked, confusion swirling in my chest. Her eyes were wide with fear, darting away as if she was expecting someone. "I came to warn you," she whispered hurriedly. "You shouldn't have gone to the lighthouse. The lost, they don't want you there." I felt an unsettling tingle creep down my spine. "The lost? What are you talking about?" She hesitated, glancing back at the trees. "If you search for the truth, it will find you. It will come for you." Before I could respond, she turned and bolted down the path, disappearing into the shadows. I stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing on me. What truth was she talking about? My mind reeled. Was I really in danger? The tapping, the figure, the whispers, they were all connected to this town's dark history. Suddenly, a rustling noise forced me to swivel my head towards the cabin. I squinted into the dark, heart racing again. Something was moving inside. My breath caught in my throat. Someone was in my home. I backed away slowly, trying to stay quiet. Whoever was inside didn't seem to notice me yet. I needed to find a way to protect myself. But what I really craved was answers. I had no choice. I had to go in. But as I reached for the door, a voice from behind me hissed, "You shouldn't have come back." My heart dropped. I turned, but there was no one there. I stood there, breathless and confused. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and the world around me felt like it had shifted. I stepped back, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, but all I found was silence, thick and heavy. With trembling hands, I pushed the door to my cabin open slowly. The creaking wood echoed in the stillness, as if announcing my presence. Inside, the air felt stale, filled with remnants of my last visit. I squinted into the shadows, searching for signs of the intruder. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. No answer. My heart raced as I stepped inside fully, closing the door behind me. I felt exposed, my back turned to the outside. The dim light from my phone barely cut through the darkness, illuminating memory-laden boxes and furniture. But there had to be something else, something I was missing. Then I noticed it. A faint glow coming from the corner of the room. I edged closer and my breath hitched. The journal lay open on the table, pages flipping as if caught in an unseen breeze. I reached out, hands shaking, and grounded myself against the rough wood. I skimmed the pages, frantic to find a clue or a warning I hadn't seen before. The entries were frantic, written in a scrawled hand that made my skin crawl. Stories of people who had visited the lighthouse and never returned, voices calling from the depths. "They seek to take what you cherish most," one entry warned. I dropped the phone and picked up the journal, determined to read more. That's when I saw it, a scribbled note on the last page that seemed different. The figure is a guardian, or a predator. It feeds on fears. Do not invite it in. A chill ran through me. The voice hadn't just been a warning, it had been a command. I had already invited something in by returning here. Suddenly I heard another noise, this time unmistakable. A soft thud from upstairs, followed by the creak of floorboards. My heart sank. Whoever, or whatever it was not just in my cabin but moving through it. I took a deep breath, fighting my instinct to run. I had come this far, I couldn't turn back now. Determination fueled my steps as I approached the staircase, each creak underfoot sounding like a thunderclap in the stillness. With every step I felt the air thicken. I paused on the first step, straining to hear. Was that whispering? An echo of the voices from the lighthouse? The memories from my visit there flashed through my mind. I couldn't let fear claim me. I gripped the railing and pushed myself up the stairs, moving as quietly as I could. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like an unseen hand. "Find us," they urged, chilling me to the bone. By the time I reached the top, the whispering stopped abruptly. I peered down the dim hallway, feeling the pull of something waiting for me. I had to know what was up there, who, or what, was in my home. I had to confront whatever shadow was lurking in the dark. But as I took another step, a door swung open at the end of the hall, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. The dim light flickered, and I couldn't make out who it was. My heart dropped again. "Who are you?" I shouted, suddenly desperate. The figure stepped forward, and in the fleeting glow I recognized the familiar face. It was her, the barista from the cafe. But there was something off about her. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice shaking. A smirk spread across her lips, and she replied, "You shouldn't have come back." Before I could process her words, the lights went out, and darkness enveloped me once more. I stumbled back, heart racing as darkness swallowed me whole. The air turned colder, a biting chill settling in my bones. I fumbled for my phone, the weak light flickering back to life. But the barista had vanished. I strained my ears for any sound, breathing, footsteps, anything. But the stillness was deafening. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice barely a whisper. No answer came, just the echo of my own timidity. With the beam from my phone, I searched the hallway, hoping to catch a glimpse of her or any sign of movement. But all I found were shadows, twisting and shifting as if alive. In the dim light I noticed something. A piece of paper had fallen from the doorway where the barista had stood. I picked it up, unfolding it slowly, my hands trembling. It was an old photograph, the same lighthouse from my nightmares. But it wasn't the lighthouse that caught my eye. Images of the townsfolk surrounded the lighthouse, their faces filled with a mix of joy and something darker lurking beneath the surface. I squinted closer and saw a figure in the shadows of the lighthouse. Could that be her? A shiver danced along my spine. Suddenly, with a loud thud, the door at the end of the hallway slammed shut. I jumped, the sound reverberating in my chest. Panic clawed at me. I had to get out, but something drew me deeper into the darkness. I took a step forward, my mind racing. What had she meant by, "You shouldn't have come back"? I felt the chills seep into my bones. The journal had warned me about the figure that fed on fears, and what if she was connected to it? I turned toward the stairs, ready to head back down. But before I could make a move, I heard it again. The whispering returned, rising around me like a wave, the words now clearer. "Join us. Join us." I was frozen, dread pooling in my stomach. I didn't want to be part of anything that felt like a trap. As if responding to my fear, the whispers escalated, blending into a chorus of voices. They called out for someone or something, and it seemed to grow impatient. I could hear footsteps now, not from above but behind me. The soft thud of approaching steps made my heart race. I turned, shining the phone's light down the hallway, and my breath caught. There it was again, the barista. But she didn't look the same. Her eyes were dark, sunken, a haunting emptiness reflecting back at me. "What do you want?" I shouted, trying to muster strength. "We want you to stay," she crooned, each word curling in the air like smoke. "You belong here now." I backed away slowly, feeling the wall behind me. The whispers grew louder, almost pleading. "You mustn't resist, it's too late." Just as I turned to run, I felt a sharp tug on my arm. I yanked away, but not before seeing something flash in her hand, a photo, an image burning like a brand. I stumbled backward, but the walls felt like they were closing in on me. Breathless, I rushed back toward the stairs, desperate to escape. But just as I reached the edge, the lights flickered back on. I froze, bewildered. Everything felt different now. The shadows were gone, and the hallway looked as if it hadn't been disturbed in ages. But just as I released a breath of relief, a sound echoed from below, the creaking of the front door opening. Someone, or something, was entering my cabin. I stepped back, heart pounding. Whatever was coming, I knew it would not be friendly. I felt rooted to the spot as the creaking door sent a thrill of fear through me. I held my breath, listening intently. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Something cold gnawed at my insides, urging me to move, yet I felt paralyzed by confusion and terror. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer came. I took a cautious step back towards the kitchen, where things were more familiar, more comforting. But the kitchen felt miles away now. Each sound from the hall felt like a reminder of how alone I really was. The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the walls. I could hear a faint rustling too, like fabric brushing against something. I peered down the hallway, the light from my phone flickering, barely cutting through the persistent shadows that pressed against my skin. Then, a figure emerged. My heart sank. It was a man, tall with broad shoulders, but his face was obscured by darkness. I squinted, trying to make out his features, but all I could see were hollow eyes glaring back at me. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice smooth yet seeping with malice. I took another step backward. "I should go," I said, my voice wavering. "Stay," he insisted, taking a step closer. "I have something to show you." In that moment, clarity struck. The town, the lighthouse, even the barista, they were all pieces of a puzzle that I was terrified to complete. I remembered the photograph, the shadowy figure. This could be connected to everything. I needed to leave, needed to escape whatever entrapment awaited me. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned to run, darting down the hallway and throwing myself toward the kitchen door. Behind me, I heard him laugh, a low, chilling sound that echoed in the confines of the cabin. "You can't run from the truth." I flung open the kitchen door, racing towards the back exit. The light from the moon guided my way, but as I reached the door, I was met with resistance. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. I rattled the doorknob, throwing my weight against it. "Let me out," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. And then I remembered my phone. In my frantic search for a way out, I pulled up the flashlight feature, illuminating the dark corners of the kitchen. But before I could scan for a window or any other escape route, I noticed movement in the reflection of the glass. Shadowy figures standing just outside the door, their faces turned towards me. They were the townsfolk from the photograph, their eyes hollow and mouths moving in silent unison. A low growl reverberated from the front room, a noise that sounded less human and more monstrous. Whatever was inside the cabin had summoned their presence. My heart raced as cold realization hit me. There was no escaping this. Just behind me I heard the sound of footsteps creeping closer. My mind raced for a plan, but it was too late. Shadows engulfed me, whispering again, "Welcome back. You're one of us now." That's when I saw it. A flicker of hope. A knife, half hidden beneath a kitchen towel. My hand grabbed it instinctively. Clenching it tightly, I turned to face whatever awaited me, ready to fight for my freedom. I faced the darkness, my grip tightening around the knife. The footsteps were closer now, moving deliberately like the slow turn of a clock. I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing in, swirling like a thick fog. There was no way to predict what would come next. "Show yourself," I challenged, my voice steadier than I felt. I don't know why I thought that would work. Maybe I was hoping for a moment of clarity in this chaos. The growl grew louder, echoing in my mind, and I could almost feel the air thicken with menace. Suddenly, a burst of laughter echoed from the hallway. It felt wrong, deranged. I shifted on my feet, ready to charge at the sound. But before I could move, the man appeared in the doorway, less shadowed this time. His face was strikingly familiar, but twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. "Ah, there you are," he said mockingly, taking a slow step into the kitchen. "What are you planning to do with that knife? You're not going to hurt me." His smile was unsettling, and I felt my heart race. "I'll do whatever it takes to get out of here," I shouted, trying to project confidence. But inside I was shivering. The townsfolk outside pressed closer to the glass, sharing in his laughter, their eyes glistening with a strange hunger. "Get out? Why would you want to do that?" His laughter faded, replaced by an unnerving curiosity. "You belong here. We have waited so long for you to return." There it was again. The talk of belonging. I thought back to the photograph, the faces, the connection. I wanted to scream that I wasn't part of this madness, but there was something deeper in his eyes that made me pause. A flicker of something familiar, something I couldn't quite place. "Why do you need me?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice firm. "What do you want?" "In time you'll understand. Your memories are waiting. They will remind you." He took another step, his hand outstretched, almost inviting. I instinctively took a step back, feeling the cool countertop hit my lower back. The shadows danced around him as he leaned closer, and for a moment I felt tongue-tied, caught between fear and an inexplicable pull. "Come with me," he urged, a soft, sinister promise in his voice. Then everything shifted. The shadows outside shuddered, the townsfolk's laughter turned into a unified chant. I couldn't make out the words, but it was a song of reclamation, of loss. From the corner of the kitchen, I noticed something sparkling, a small silver locket lying half-covered beneath a chair. "That's mine!" I cried out, the recognition crashing down. The locket was identical to one I had lost long ago, my grandmother's. I had thought it stolen. "Yes, it's yours," he replied, the response dripping with mock serenity. "But it's part of a bigger story. Without it, you can't understand your role in all of this." A sudden crash echoed behind me as the back door slammed against the wall, revealing a blinding light. The townsfolk shrank back from the sudden brightness, but the man didn't flinch. "Choose wisely," he said softly, a smirk creeping back onto his lips. "Will you embrace what you are, or will you run back into the dark?" The light from the doorway filled the room, and I felt its warmth against my skin. It was a lifeline. I needed to make a choice, and fast. As I looked between the man and the flashing silhouettes of the townsfolk, I knew I had to act. I could either face whatever horrific truth awaited me or leap into the unknown. I took a deep breath and charged toward the light, the knife still clutched tightly in my hand. The light enveloped me, warm and blinding, pulling me forward with an urgency I couldn't resist. I stumbled into the doorway, the knife gripped tightly in my hand. As soon as I crossed the threshold, I found myself in another world, one that felt both hauntingly familiar and entirely foreign. I was no longer in the kitchen. Instead, I stood in a narrow street lined with old wooden houses, their windows casting long shadows as the sun began to set. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. I looked around, breathless. This was the town from the photograph, the same small town my grandmother had called home. I could see echoes of life here, but they felt distant, almost hidden beneath the surface. "Welcome back," a voice called, pulling me from my thoughts. I turned and saw a figure approaching. It was a woman with dark hair laced with gray, her face lined with years of worry and determination. She had the same features, sharp jawline, deep-set eyes as my grandmother. "Who are you?" I stammered, the warmth from the light still flickering on my skin. "I'm your grandmother's sister," she said, her voice steady but sorrowful. "I've been waiting for you to come home." Her eyes burned with an intensity that made me shudder. "Home? This is—" I swallowed hard, trying to mask my confusion. "This is not where I belong." "Not yet," she replied gently. "You don't understand the ties that bind our family to this town, the reason you had to return." Before I could respond, memories flooded my mind, fragments of laughter, warmth, and shadows flickering over faces I thought I'd forgotten. I shook my head, trying to clear the rush of emotions. "What do you want from me? Why now?" "We're running out of time," she said, urgency creeping into her tone. "The darkness is always hungry, and it seeks to reclaim what it lost." Suddenly I heard the chant from before rising around me, the townsfolk emerging from the edges of the street, their faces twisted with an otherworldly hunger, identical to the man's. The sight of them chilled me to the bone. "Join us, or watch everything you know be consumed by it," my grandmother's sister warned, pointing toward the rising shadows that appeared to lick at the edges of the light. Panic surged in me. I glanced back toward the light I had just left, almost willing it to take me back, but the doorway I stepped through was fading, and I felt trapped. "That locket," she said, noticing my hand still gripping the knife. "It's the key. Only with it can you tap into your true essence. Without it, you'll never escape this town. Or them." I looked down at the knife. The weight of it was reassuring, but it seemed insignificant against the growing tide of shadows. What if I don't choose? What if I refuse? "That would mean surrender," she said softly, her eyes growing darker. "And surrender keeps the darkness alive." I took a step back, my heart racing. But then I caught sight of my grandmother's locket lying near a pair of worn shoes, half buried under the dirt. As I reached for it, the chanting grew louder, and the crowd began to close in. That's when I noticed something sparkling under the dirt next to it, a tiny silver ring glimmering in the grass. It looked ancient, delicate, but familiar. With my heart pounding, I realized it wasn't just another ornament. It was something much darker. I snatched the locket and the ring just as the shadows surged forward, the light starting to flicker. There was no more time. I had to decide before it was too late. I could either confront the truth or let the shadows swallow me whole. With both items in hand, I turned back to my grandmother's sister, ready to face whatever truth awaited me. But the darkness was closer than I anticipated. The air thickened around me, and the shadows advanced like a living thing, eager to claim me. I tightened my grip on the locket and the ring, feeling their weight. The chanting reached a fever pitch, a symphony of voices rising and falling like a tide, threatening to drown me. "Make your choice," my grandmother's sister shouted, her eyes wide, almost pleading. "The darkness waits for no one." I glanced between her and the crowd. Their faces were a blend of desperation and hunger, the ones I loved and feared, twisted by something malevolent. I took a shaky breath and spoke. "What does this all mean? What are they?" "They're tethered to the darkness," she replied, her voice barely audible over the noise. "And so are you. Your return was not just to revisit the past, but to confront it. You possess the power to break this cycle." I felt a surge of anger. You still haven't told me what to do. Use the locket and ring. Together they conceal the darkness and set you free. But it comes with a price. Her expression hardened. You must invite the shadows in, face them, and then bond them to your power. Only then can we be free. I hesitated, fear coursing through me. I didn't want to summon what I feared most. But just as I contemplated my next move, a voice broke through the chant. Do it! A tall man stepped forward, his body shaking as he spoke. His features were sharp like knives cutting through the haze, and I recognized him as one of the townsfolk from the photograph. End the pain before it consumes us all. His words echoed in my mind. What pain? What had these people endured? Before I could ask, the shadows shifted, pushing closer, and I felt an icy breath on my neck. The darkness craved connection, a bond, and I was its target. Now, get ready, my grandmother's sister urged. You must act before they take you. I clutched the locket and ring tighter, their energies thrumming against each other in my hands. What if I failed? What if I unleashed a chaos I couldn't control? But the choice was no longer mine. The chanting pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. I took a step forward, blocking out the crowd, focusing on the locket. I won't allow this darkness to take over. As the words left my lips, the shadows recoiled, hissing like a wounded animal. A blinding light erupted around us, fueled by my resolve. With a swift motion, I pressed the locket against the palm of my other hand, letting it absorb all my fears, all my memories. The ring sparkled, a beacon of hope despite the swirling chaos. I closed my eyes and whispered the secrets my grandmother had buried long ago. A warmth enveloped me, forcing the darkness to pause. But just as I felt a sliver of hope, a figure emerged from the shadows, a familiar face twisted in anguish. It was him, the man from the photograph, his eyes pleading yet devoid of trust. You think you can save us? You're just like the others. My stomach dropped. No, I shouted, but the weight of doubt pressed heavily on my shoulders. I'm here to help. The ground shook beneath me, and an icy dread clutched my heart as I realized that my growing powers couldn't be controlled by sheer will alone. The darkness was intelligent, its hunger insatiable. Suddenly, the ground cracked open at my feet, and shadows shot up toward the sky. You belong to us, they whispered, echoing within my mind. And just then, in the chaos of swirling shadows and anguished faces, I saw a glimmer in the darkness. It felt like a warning, a choice that loomed ahead. Would I stand my ground or let them drag me down? This was just the beginning, and I needed to make my move, before it was too late. The moment hung heavy in the air, filled with a palpable tension. I could feel the chiming of my heart echoing against the weight of darkness swirling around me, as shadows clawed closer, whispering promises of acceptance and belonging. I felt a spark of defiance ignite within me. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the locket and ring tighter, drawing strength from the memories they held. The warmth radiating from them filled me with the core truth of who I was. A stubborn survivor, not just a lost soul to be consumed. I won't succumb, I declared, my voice rising above the cacophony of whispers. The shadows screeched, recoiling momentarily as if I had struck them. Fueled by my determination, I remembered my grandmother's legacy, her sacrifices entwined with this very town, binding our fates. Let me show you light, I shouted, thrusting the locket forward. As it glowed and pulsed, I felt the fragmented memories it carried coalesce. I envisioned my family, the loves and losses, every moment that had woven my existence, a tapestry refusing to fade under the weight of fear. The shadows hissed, inching back, their hunger morphing into anger. The figure of the man from the photograph lunged toward me but found an invisible barrier, halting his advance. You think you're stronger? You're ours, he snarled, but the desperation in his eyes betrayed the truth. He was a pawn trapped within the darkness, not its master. Drawing upon the energy of the ring, I shouted, I'll break this cycle. I pointed both the locket and ring at the encroaching shadows, unleashing a blinding burst of light. It surged forward like a shield, encompassing the shadowy figures, illuminating the fear that had shackled them for so long. They shrieked, the sound piercing the air like shattering glass as the light thrust against their forms. It was both a fight and a revelation, a confrontation not just with my own past, but with theirs. I focused on the town's history, the bitterness of souls lost to darkness pulling those emotions forth to cleanse the curse that engulfed us. The shadows began to shimmer and fragment. Faces from the past morphed around me, joyous, anguished, desperate, and I recognized the pain that connected us all. With every ounce of my resolve, I declared, "You don't have to be trapped anymore." Suddenly, a surge of clarity flooded through me. The line between the light and the darkness blurred, revealing that they were not opposing forces but two sides of an eternal struggle, both seeking resolution, healing. And then in a heartbeat, the figure lunged for me again and I felt a surge of terror clawing at my throat. Gripping the locket and the ring, I tore my gaze from the shadows, focusing instead on a future beyond mere survival. "I break this cycle," I cried, throwing my arms wide open, welcoming the darkness. The shadows surged forward and encircled me, and for an instant, it felt suffocating, promising despair. But I stood firm, grounding myself in the collective fears and longings. Light erupted at the center of the swirl, brighter than I could have imagined, illuminating secrets, letting them breathe. "This is where you belong. And this is where you can finally heal." I felt the locket's energy surge through me, illuminating the darkness with recognition rather than rejection. The shadows stirred, their chaotic edges softening. The despair in the faces surrounding me began to shift, infusing warmth instead of cold. I could almost hear whispers of gratitude in the air as their transformations unfolded. One by one, they joined the brilliance of the light, merging and redefining what haunted them. In a blurry collision of shadows and light, something shifted. The hold of darkness weakened, and as the last vestiges fell away, clarity washed over me. An echo of laughter rose and mingled with faint voices of my grandmother, reassuring me that everything was connected, woven threads of loss and light. And as I opened my eyes, I stood back in the kitchen, the air filling with crisp freshness, echoing with the hushed turmoil of what had just transpired. Silence wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, but I knew it wasn't truly over. The cabin felt lighter, yet lurking questions still lingered in the corners. What of the barista? And the intoxication of darkness still carried an alluring weight. I could feel it calling in the distance, a siren song of unresolved stories begging for more. Still, I realized I was not alone. The price had been paid. The darkness satisfied for now. Those lost souls, including my ancestors, had reclaimed their histories. But would I ever be free of this pull? I couldn't shake the feeling that the connection between light and darkness would always exist, an indelible part of who I was now. Perhaps one day I'd return to face the remnants of that which still remained. As I stepped outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next, knowing my journey was far from over. I moved forward, grasping a fragile hope mingled with uncertainty. A step into an ambiguous world that dared me to understand its mysteries, to dance once more with shadows and light.